great week. Had close to 70 kids that come through here this week every night. So it's a big time for us. And I know we're pleased, and I think God's pleased too. And also, I want to make you aware of a couple of events coming up. First of all, next Saturday night at 6 o'clock, the Power Up worship service in Weaver Park is happening that night. Our Cornerstone team will have a team there. Also have another team from Birmingham Render Life will be there leading worship that night. Also, Matt Headley and his wife will be singing that night. He's the pastor of United Methodist Church. Lamont Mayer Jr. from Weaver Congregational Methodist, he's the host that night. And then, I lost her name. What's her name? Natasha. I want to call her Nicole. I knew that was wrong. Natasha, she's coming. She's our featured speaker. Where does she live? Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania. She's great. She was there last year. Yeah. So I'm having to remember all these things. Also remember coming up August the 5th, we're having our very first membership day. It's the day where we're going to bring in members to the church. Never had membership before. So we're going to do that on August 5th. If you want to be part of that, we want you to be part of that day. It's going to be a big day. We're going to take some pictures. We're going to bring everybody in at once. Everybody who wants to be a member, everybody who's been coming here for a long time, but you haven't been coming here for a long time, but you say, this is where I want to be part of it. We're going to bring you in that day as well. One more announcement, and then I'm done. This Tuesday at 10 a.m. here, we're going to be preparing to feed the Weaver band. And so if you want to come, you want to volunteer and help cook food, help pack that food up, you be here at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. It's a blessing to them, and it's a blessing to get to be the hands of being God. Amen. I'm going to ask the ushers if they would to come up this time to receive this morning's offering. If you're a guest of ours, welcome. We don't expect anything from you this morning. We're not asking you to give. We just want you to enjoy your time here and let the Lord speak to you this morning. Also, I want to welcome my grandmother, Marie Martin. She's here this morning with us. Her church is not meeting this morning, so thank you for being here. We love to see you. Let's pray. God, we love you. We praise you. We look forward to today, God. We've come to bring you a blessing, God. We're not just in the receiving market today, God. We're in the giving market, God. We're going to give you a blessing, bring a blessing, be a blessing. So that we can be a blessing to somebody else, God. Because you've blessed us, God. And so I thank you for the opportunity we have to impact this community. I thank you for the opportunity that we have to reach those that are here this morning, but also to reach those that aren't here this morning, God. Open our hands and our arms wide, God. And I pray you would use this offering this morning to build your kingdom, God. And Lord, it would be something that would be live and vibrant, God. And we thank you for everything that you do for us. It's so much more than we deserve, God. So move amongst us today. Speak to hearts, God. And open us up to hear what the Spirit would say today. In your name I pray. Amen. Amen.
You guys know that this week we had a wonderfully exhausting time at Vacation Bible School. So one thing we always like to do on the Sunday right after Vacation Bible School is let the kids come up and show you some of the stuff they did. So we have a couple of people, y'all call them the Land Mermaids. And kids, come on up. We're going to do a couple of songs. It's the ones you know. All the kids.
Go kids, go. Go girls.
100% of the kids. Come on up. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be great. It's cool. It's really good. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so we're gonna do. What's that first one?
Never let me go.
Yes, Never Let Go. Y'all know that one? Yes, you do. Okay, so we don't know it. Y'all might want to spread out so you can, move. Yeah.
Through every storm of life, I know you're by my side. So I am holding on to your promises. You are the God who holds my future, all my dreams. So I am holding on. You'll never let go of me. You gave me hope when hope was all but gone. A second chance to sing a brand new song. You opened up my eyes to see. You rescued me, rescued me. You showed the way when there was no way out. Cleared up my mind when you erased all doubt. You made me strong when I was weak. You rescued me, rescued me. Through every storm of life, I know you're by my side. So I am holding on to your promises. You are the God who holds my future, all my dreams. So I am holding on. You'll never let go of me. Holding on to you. You are my God. I know you'll see me
Bible School when you were young? A lot of people, yes. So that's the memories that we were able to make and seeds that we were able to plant this past week. And I want to recognize all of you. I know we've said thank you before today, but really quick, if you were a station leader, stand up. If you were a helper, if you were a crew leader, if you helped with decorations, I know y'all got legs. Come on, stand up. Let's see, who else? Decorations. If you sent a prayer for us, we felt them the weeks before, the planning, all that went into it. We appreciate every single one of you guys. And I could not have done it. Randy could not have done it without all of you working together. And we're so appreciative.
Okay, so if you were a kid that came up and sang a song, you can go to children's church now. I'm kidding, everybody can go. You can go.
It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with mercies that I knew. All my fears and doubts, well, they can all come true because they can't stay long. And I'm here with you. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with
spite of what I see, Lord, I believe. But help my unbelief, I choose to trust you. No matter what I feel, let faith arise. Let faith arise. For my champion's not dead, he is alive. And he already knows my every need. Surely he will come and rescue me. God of miracles come. We need your supernatural love to break through. Nothing's impossible. Your
whatsoever that the reason that I'm here is on the backs of her prayers. Year after year, day after day. It makes a difference. Of course, I'm the pastor here. I was a worship pastor before I came here. Been in ministry, done outreach ministry, done a lot of things. My brother is the web administrator for Bible.com. He works for the biggest church in the country. Very successful. If you've been to Bible.com, you've seen his work. It's on the backs of her prayers. She has led the way. And I'm thankful for it, and I honor her. Would you give her a hand this morning? If you have your Bibles this morning, would you turn to Nehemiah? You know, as I say Nehemiah, I do want to recognize this. I've always had this love for the story of David. And I've said many times that I wish I could be like David. You know, he was handsome. That's a good thing. He was a great musician. That's a good thing. And he was an enemy-slaying warrior. I like all those things about David. And then he's a man after God's own heart. I like all those things. He's this tough, rugged guy. But when I'm thinking about taking on a project, when I'm thinking about leading a group of people to do the impossible, I always dream of being Nehemiah. Nehemiah is just that guy. He rose up. He was the cupbearer to the king. In other words, he was a slave in a foreign country because his country had been invaded. And yet, he was serving the king. But yet, when the time came, God prepared a way for him to leave that. And he did something that was deemed impossible, something that couldn't be done in years and years and years and years, rebuilding the walls of Judah. He did it in 52 days. Why? Because when God was ready to build, he found a man who was ready to do what he was ready to do. And I want to be a kind of man that's ready for whatever God's ready to do, even if it seems impossible. Because let me tell you, if it was possible, I wouldn't need God to do it. I just couldn't do it. So I love Nehemiah. He's passionate, he's confident, and he's extremely successful. He's tough as nails. He's committed to prayer, and he outworks all those around him. He never sweated the small stuff, and he's constantly making the impossible possible, which is just kind of one of his gifts. That's just what he does. Nehemiah is a man's man. And I'm going to show you some things about Nehemiah that you'll realize he's a man's man. But not only is he a man's man, but he's also a true man of God. And I wanted to name this message this morning, Calls, Walls, and Three Jerks Who Tried to Stop It. But instead I went for another name, and it's called When God Gets Ready to Build. Nehemiah chapter 1. Let's go there this morning. So excited to be here with you. If you don't have your Bible this morning, you can follow along with me in the screen. You can also follow along in YouVersion in the Bible app. Every note I have is in there, and you can follow along with that. It's just something that we provide. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hananiah, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. And when I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. And for some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. You want to talk about a passionate man? He was passionate about his people. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love for those who love him and keeps his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to the heart to hear the prayer that your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them there, bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this servant and to the is next to the king, and when the king gets food or he gets wine, he says, hey, taste this. And if the cupbearer dies, the king knows it's not fit for him to eat it. Okay? That's basically it. But the thing about it is, the cupbearer is also a pretty trusted individual because he has to be honest with the king. I mean, you can just go, yeah, it's good, you know? And then the king gets it and dies. And number one, if the king gets it and dies, you're probably going to die too. So you've got to filter these things out. But he's a trusted individual to the king. And that's what Nehemiah's job was. He would have been held captive because Jerusalem had been taken over. The Israelites were in captivity. Some of them were living back in Jerusalem in a broken city. And let me tell you, a city without walls cannot be a city because anybody can come in it and take what they want. There's no economy in a city without walls. They can't have an economy because somebody will come in there and mess it up. Somebody will come in and take it. And what happens is foreigners come in the city and they cause problems. And so what happens is all these people, all these Israelites are back there in the walls and they're living in tents. They don't even have permanent structures. And so that's kind of what's going on. And Nehemiah is one of the ones that are still captive in the citadel of Susa. And he's serving as the cupbearer of the king. Now, how do you respond when God begins to move on your heart about a situation? Something you become broken about, passionate about, or concerned about. How do you respond to those things? Or do you have those things that happen in your life? I know for us, sometimes God just moves on our heart, like we need to do this. We feel like really strongly that we need to move a certain way, or we need to do a certain thing. I know with the elders, sometimes we feel as a group, this is just the direction that we feel like God is telling us to go. And we pray for wisdom, you know. It's the same way in our own life. But the thing is, how do you respond when those kind of things come up? Because how you respond determines the outcome. And what I found out about Nehemiah is Nehemiah began with prayer. For Nehemiah, prayer was a first resource, not a last resort. It was a first resource, not a last resort. Martin Luther said it like this. He said, I have so much to do today that I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer. Wouldn't it be good if we all thought that way? I've got a lot to do today. I tell you what, if I'm going to get it done, I better pray. I better spend some real time in prayer. And then, Oswald Chambers said it like this. He said, prayer does not fit us for the greater work. Prayer is the greater work. It is. A lot of times it's our second thought. It needs to be our first thought. All right? And then, I love this one, John Wesley. He said this, God does nothing except in response to believing prayer. In other words, prayer that you have faith that it's going to be accomplished. Nehemiah, he's brokenhearted. His home lies in ruins. And he was a servant in a foreign kingdom. And he didn't have all the answers. So he prayed. God teach us something about life. When you go, I just don't know what to do anymore. The kids, they act crazy. My spouse don't ever listen to me. We don't have enough money to meet our bills. Things don't happen. We got to pray. We got to pray. We got to pray. We got to pray. And so that's what Nehemiah does. And what I love about Nehemiah is in everything that's going on, he's never shaken by the circumstance. He says, God, give me favor with this man. Give me favor with the king. And upon hearing the report of how everything was bad, I mean, the guy that Hananiah, he gave the report, it wasn't a good report. He said, hey, the city lies in ruins, the people lie in ruins, the gates have been burned up with fire, everything's pretty much bad. And upon hearing the report, though, it did not make Nehemiah run from the situation, it made Nehemiah run to the situation. See, that's the difference in real leadership. Real leadership says, oh, there's the problem, let me figure out a way to face it. And then they go to God, and God reveals to them a plan. Instead, he just committed himself to prayer, and he waited on the Lord. Now, let me tell you this. It says, he prays in chapter 1, and it says that, he says, oh, give me favor with this man. And he starts to pray. Well, let me tell you, from chapter 1 to where chapter 2 begins, there's a 4-month time period there. There's 4 months. How many of us can start praying for something and wait on it? The way that it reads, if you just read it and you don't know what the months are because we don't know that calendar, if you just read it, you're like, oh, okay, he prayed and then he got favor with the king. No, he waited 4 months. And in that time, he kept praying and he kept believing. Not knowing where the answer would come from, but believing the answer was coming. And so that means sometimes you're going to have to push through. And he risked his life. And what I want to show you about this next part, if you flip to chapter 2 in Nehemiah, is that Nehemiah seized the opportunity when it presented itself. In those 4 months prior to this, as he went before the king each day, the opportunity never presented itself. But one day, the opportunity presented itself for Nehemiah to get the answer to his prayer, and he reached out and he got it. Let's look at it right here. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1. It says, Nehemiah was not shaken, first of all, by the circumstance. He seized the opportunity. In the month of Nisan, the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine, and I gave it to the king. And I had never been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad and not ill? In other words, why do you look sad if you're not sick? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart. And I was very much afraid. Why was he very much afraid? Because at that point right there, the king could have killed him. You're sad in my presence. I won't be sad. Verse 3, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? And the king said to me, what is it you want? And then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it. Now, what you got to understand is he's asking to rebuild a city that this kingdom had torn down. How do you go to the people that tore it down and say, well, hey, can you help us rebuild it? Then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take and when will you be back? And it pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of God was on me, the king granted my request. And so I went to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates and I gave them the king's letter. And the king had also sent army officers and cavalry with him. Do you see what I'm saying? He prayed for 4 months. And in those 4 months, God orchestrated the events that went unfold. God put all the things in place. So when you're praying and you're not seeing anything, it doesn't mean that God's not working. It means that he's setting things into place. He's moving things in place to advance, not necessarily your goodwill, but to advance his plan. And we got to understand, what are we trying to live for? And so this is what happens at the end of the prayer here. What I love about this is that Nehemiah, God provides an answer. And what's interesting is Nehemiah may have felt like nothing was happening, but the entire time God was preparing the king's heart to provide not just his freedom, but all the materials needed to rebuild the walls. And God may seem silent at times, and you may feel like he doesn't hear you. But when in fact, we just need to keep praying and believing that he will respond with all we need to accomplish his will. I mean, you got to think for Nehemiah, this is a great cost. This is a great cost. If you've only dealt in nickels and dimes, you don't know what it's like to hold hundreds. And so for Nehemiah, this was a big thing. I'm going to have a great cost if I'm going to accomplish this. And that's why I say when you can do the possible, you do it. But when it's impossible, you're going to have to depend on God to do it. And so here you had this great cost, and God lines up every single time. And what I've learned too is that any time that there is a great plan, it takes a great leader. If you look at Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 11, this is what I want to show you about Nehemiah. What kind of leader this man is. It says, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. And there were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. And he said, by night I went through the valley gate toward the jackal wall and the dome gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem which had been broken down, and its gates which had been destroyed with fire. And then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for the mount to go through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally I turned back and re-entered to the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews, or the priests, or nobles, or officials, or any other who would be doing the work, who would be doing this good work. What I see about Nehemiah is this. It says that at night, Nehemiah checked on the condition of the walls. You want to see a good leader? You want to find somebody who's leading? They're working while others are sleeping. That's what Nehemiah's doing here. Everybody's asleep, and he takes his horse or his donkey, whatever he's on, and he rides benefits that I've found from working in the late hours of the night or the early hours of the morning is distractions are limited. Distractions are limited. What is the most quiet time in your home? At night. Everybody's asleep. April and I long for that moment. Some of you have more kids than we do. You really do. It's the moment where everything ceases to be loud, where the questions stop, where you're not getting 100 things pulled at you from every side. And so what happens is this leader is embracing this thing that I'm going to go out and work where everybody else is asleep. I heard this on the radio. Are you familiar with Alexander Shinar? You know, he's got all the billboards. He said this. He said, the only thing that comes to a sleeper is a dream. You probably heard that. You listen to the radio. I hear it about once a day. The only thing that comes to a sleeper is a dream. See, you can want to do all the right things, but you can sleep through the planning period. It takes people to get up or to stay up when everybody else is sleeping. I believe in rest. I think you should get plenty of it. But the question is this: why are you losing sleep? Some of you say, I don't get enough rest. Why are you losing sleep? If there's things like binge watching Netflix, you might ought to get your priorities straight. All right? Or staying out too late. See, if you're going to move forward with God's plan, you'll have to deal with distractions, and with every advance, what you're going to find is with every advance of God's kingdom, there's going to be an adversary. There's going to be something that stands in your way. Someone that stands in your way. I've served in the church long enough, not this church particularly, but in church period. And what I found out is sometimes your adversary can even be somebody that you sit next to in church. Sometimes, people aren't perfect in church. And they may think that they've got the right thing going on, but in fact, they may be discouraging you. And has anyone ever tried to advance a kingdom and not been met with a force to try to stop it? And it was the same way for Nehemiah. You can just expect it. If you set out on a journey to do something for God, what's going to happen is you're going to run into somebody that doesn't want you to do it. Look here. With every advance, there is an adversary. Nehemiah chapter 4, when Sanballat, the governor of Samaria, heard that we were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, he became angry and started insulting our people. In front of his friends in the Samaritan army, he said, what is this feeble bunch of Jews trying to do? Are they going to rebuild the wall and offer sacrifices all in one day? Do they think that they can make something out of a pile of scorched stones? Tobiah from Ammon was standing beside Sanballat and said, look at that wall they are building. Why, even a fox could knock over a pile of stones. But I pray, our God, these people hate us and have wished horrible things for us. Please answer our prayers and make their insults fall on them. And let them be the ones to be dragged away as prisoners of war. And don't forgive the means and evil way they have insulted the builders. And the people worked hard, and we built the walls in Jerusalem halfway up again. But Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people from the city of Ashdod saw the walls going up and the holes being repaired, so they became angry and decided to stir up trouble and to fight against the people of Jerusalem. But we kept on praying to our God. And we also stationed guards day and night. What I learned about this as I read it is that number one, he prays, his prayer here, but then he prepares. Some of us are really good at praying, and we're like, God, do it, God, do it, but we're not good at preparing. You know what? I can pray all day that God would make these walls in here, but eventually God says, with your own two hands. You know what I'm saying? We're praying for supernatural results for natural things in life. When God's just saying, hey, sometimes you need to pray and you need to prepare. One of the things I noticed too about the story right here when we're talking about adversaries is it said that there was Sanballat, he was a Samaritan. Well, they're not really friendly with the Jews. And then there was Tobiah, the Ammonite. They're not really friendly with the Jews. And then there was Geshem, they're not really. Well, what are they doing in the city? Well, when you don't take care of your walls, people who you don't want to come in and they live amongst you and they cause problems for you. There's something about setting a border between you and the things that aren't like you that we need to do. And Jerusalem had allowed the walls to be torn down. So they were living under the affliction of people who should have never been there in the first place. What I love about the passage is Nehemiah, he prays first and then he prepares. Why would we not call on a supernatural, powerful, mighty God to work and intervene in the situation first? No matter what it is. God, work this like what we have now at the church. We know we need more room. Look around this morning. We have 5 or 10 families out this morning. I think we have 140-something seats, and there was 130 people here earlier when we counted right before offering. We know we need more room. And many of us would like to build a new sanctuary. But I think there's kind of a twofold process here. We need to pray, and we need to prepare. We need to pray, and we need to prepare. And some of you may be preparing, but you never pray. You're like, oh, I give every week, but you never pray. And some of you may be praying, but you never prepare. And I pray every week, but I don't give. I don't help. And then there's the other side of this. See, we need to pray, and we need to faithfully give. We need to pray, and we need to volunteer when it's needed. We need to pray, and we need to serve when it's needed. We need to pray, and we need to make sure that we attend faithfully. See, we need more people right now at the church. We have needs. We have a need right now at the church where we need more people to volunteer to help clean. We have some families that rotate, and it gets busy, and it gets difficult. And it's a big place to try to do it, so one person can't do it. So what we do is we need more families that are willing to clean. We also need more children's workers right now. I don't know if you saw it or not, but there was a mass exodus when we called the children's church to lead today. And there's a group down there, and some of them volunteer 2 weeks out of 4 to help with the kids. And they shouldn't have to do that. We need more help. We need more people to rise up, more people to take. We need to pray, but we need to prepare. And we can't simply pray for supernatural solutions when God has given us the ability to solve many of our own problems with our own 2 hands. We kind of got to be asking God to move on our behalf, but we're not willing to do everything that we can. We got some plans, and the elders, we're going to be announcing some future plans that we've got coming up soon, and things that we've met, and we've talked about the situation, where we need to go as a church, what we're going to have to do to make it happen, and we're going to be delivering those. Probably on August 5th on Membership Day. But we've got to prepare, and we've got to come in. In your leadership here, that's what we've been trying to do. What I put next is I found this is adversaries come in all forms. We have sang songs like this. This is how I fight my battles. But in the privacy of our own mind and heart, we come and we operate in fear. Have you ever been in that situation where it's like, oh, my enemy is not necessarily somebody, but it's something that I'm in fear of. And I've been this both times. I've been fearful and I've been courageous. And the devil loves to make me fearful. Why? Because he can cause me to weaken my advances or paralyze my persistence when I live in fear. When God wants me to run, if I start to fear, what will happen is I'll start to walk. And then I'll be still. And I don't want to do any of those things. And so, what we see here is that fear is also contagious. There's a fly on there, sorry. It's on my hair. Fear is also contagious. If we ever let fear begin to establish itself, it will seep through all the people. And so, what I figured out is that the battle will burn the hottest, the doubts will climb the highest, when the most to gain becomes within reach. Let me say that again. The battle will burn the hottest, the doubts will climb the highest, when the most to gain becomes within reach. If Nehemiah could get the wall built in Judah, in Jerusalem, and all the place there around, if he could get those walls built, then the city could live again. And so what happened? All the outsiders, all the enemies, they began to stir up a noise. Why? Because they didn't want that to happen. And see, because what's happening as they're building that wall up, is striking fear in their enemies' hearts, because they go, man, if they can do that, then they can do anything. And it literally says that in Nehemiah. If you read through it, it says people began to hear the noise of them building the walls. They began to get fearful for them, because they thought, man, they've come together. They're establishing themselves again. And no walls, like I said, it meant no protection. No protection meant no economy. And it meant anyone could come in and anyone could come out. And that's the reason you've got foreigners in a city that's not meant for them. They were the enemies of the Jews, yet because there were no walls, they had become influential people in the city. And the battle heated up. Why? Because the bounty was within reach. The battle heated up because the bounty was in reach. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, this is chapter 4, verse 10. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. And all our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and will kill them and put an end to the work. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the walls, at the exposed places, posting them by the families with their sword, spears, and bows. And after I looked over these things, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. And when our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, and each went to our own work. And from that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. And the officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon with the other. They did their work with one hand and they held their weapon with the other. And that's what I see here. As we succeed as a church, we're going to have to watch ourselves. We're going to have to watch our back. We're going to have to be careful. Because there's going to be a temptation to major on minors. There's going to be a temptation to argue over things that are small and allow yourself to get cranky, easily frustrated, critical. Why? Because the devil likes to cause division. Because unity is dangerous to the enemy. It says this, though, what I picked up is they build the wall halfway up. And they do that in like record time. But then they split their force in two. And one group continues to build, and one group continues to guard. So now they're building with half the force. But then look, it goes again, and it says, well, with one hand they laid blocks, and with one hand they held the sword. Now they've cut their force in half again because you're only working with one hand. But yet they still managed to build all of the walls in 52 days. 52 days. With a limited force. That only happens with powerful God. See, you need unity in the church. But you also need a willingness to work. We've just come out of a great week of VBS where we influenced around 70 children. But we could have not done it with unity alone. Just because Johnny and I decided, hey, we're together on this, if we hadn't shown up each night, the work wouldn't have got done. See, there's something about having unity, but there's something about having unity paired with a willingness to work for God's kingdom. And see, one thing I've learned this year about, we set this theme at the beginning of the year. We said we're going to run in 2018. Oh, we're going to run. It sounded so good when I put it on paper. I was like, oh, running in 2018. Yeah, this is good. I like this. And the theme, I've kept up. But when you run, obstacles approach faster and decisions have to be made more quickly. And that's what I realized this year. Yeah, we're running. But man, when you're running and the little rock comes at you, it's a big decision. You've got to make a quick one or you're going to trip and fall. And one thing that I've realized is, however, anything that's thrown at you, anything that comes at you can be avoided as long as you anticipate it. And so what I'm telling you this time, I'm saying, hey, watch your back, watch things, watch for this, watch for that, is I'm saying, hey, I'm telling you ahead of time to look out ahead of yourself, because there's going to be some things as we grow, as we get bigger as a church, that are going to come at you really fast. But if you know they're coming, you can dodge them. And so, believe the best in people. If someone doesn't say it to you directly, don't assume that they're saying it to you away from you. It's so easy to believe that people are talking about you when they're not. I'll be honest, a lot of times people will be like, what's wrong with you today, man? And I'll be thinking about where this church is going to be in 5 years. I mean, I'll just be thinking that. Or I'll be thinking about a project that I have at work. And somebody might say, well, Pastor, are you mad at somebody? No. I'm not mad at anybody. Sometimes we just have a lot on our mind. Some of you got 3 and 4 children. You may be up here, you may be standing in the sanctuary, but you may be thinking, where's my kid starting a fire? They're not mad at me. They're just concerned about everybody else's well-being. And for that, I appreciate it. See, the devil wants to lie to you. He wants to make you think everybody's against you. Because if Sean gets to thinking I'm against him, what will he do? He'll either quit coming or he'll deem himself useless for what the work that we've got ahead of us. And I need him on my side. If Jamie thinks I'm against him just because I walk by him one day because I'm thinking about something else, maybe it's your kids that are starting the fire, then we'll become divided. Well, if we're divided, we're not near as strong as we once were. The devil will lie to you and tell you people don't like you. He'll tell you that people don't care for you, that people don't love you. And it's not true. Do not allow the devil to steal away the joy and the blessing that God has given us here. As we round it out here, what I've learned too is distractions are always the enemy of progress. Distractions are the enemy of progress. You want to get up and you want to start doing something, don't cut your TV on. It'll distract you. I mean, if I get up and I kick in front of the TV and I cut it on, more than likely I'm not going to get up and get that truck washed that day. You know, I'm going to get it, especially during football season. It just starts with one game, and then it's 2, and then it's 3, and then it's 11 o'clock, and I got to go to church the next day. It's just kind of distractions. Distractions are the enemy of progress. Don't let things that aren't worth your time, have any place in your life to distract you from God's voice and direction in your life. And what happens is distractions, they come in many forms. Sometimes what I've found about distractions is you've got to drive out the distraction. You got to drive out. You got to make a full-on attack. You have to meet that distraction head on and face it with force. We don't like to do that. We don't like confrontation. But sometimes there's things in our life that we've got to meet with force. Let me show you what Nehemiah did. This is why I said he's a man's man. Verses there. Nehemiah chapter 13. Moreover, in those days I saw men of Judah who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, or the language of one of the other people, and did not know how to speak the language of Judah. I rebuked them and called curses down on them. I beat some of the men and pulled out their hair. That's right. In a godly way. That's right. Yeah, I like it. And he said, I made them take an oath in God's name and said, you are not to give your daughters in marriage to their sons, nor are you to take their daughters in marriage for your sons or for yourselves. Was it not because of marriages like these that Solomon, king of Israel, sinned? Sometimes you got to take it on full force. You got to say, that ain't going to happen here. You might have to go with your children. Grab them up. Let them know. We don't operate that way here. You might have to do it with somebody that's your neighbor or something. Maybe they're doing something you don't like. You might have to say, hey, no, not here. What's happened is we have a few people that got that kind of backbone anymore. Sometimes you got to be direct. And I tell you, if you deal with it direct, you won't have to deal with it indirectly. You need to learn how to silence the voices that are causing you the problem. Look here, look, the next one. Sometimes you have to drown out your distractions. So you got to drive them out. Well, sometimes you got to drown them out. In other words, you got to quit listening to things that aren't profiting you. There are going to be people that tell you you can't. I've heard it all my life. You can't do that. You won't do that. But I don't listen to them. A long time ago, I learned how to listen to the voice of God, and that's the voice I listen to. And sometimes, let me tell you, it goes against what others say. But in the end, it works out. I won't listen to any of these voices. It may come for a little while, but I learned to drown it out. Listen, look here. Nehemiah chapter 6, and it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian and the rest of our enemies heard that I had builded the wall and that there was no breach left therein, though at the time I had not set up the doors upon the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, come, let us meet together in some one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief. And I sent messengers to them and to them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease, whilst I leave it, and come down to you? And yet they sent unto me 4 times after this, sword. I answered them after in the same manner. Brett Lloyd shared this verse back with me about a month ago in life group, and I've thought about it ever since then. When distractions come, I'm doing a good work, and I don't have time to come down. You want to talk bad? You want to get discouraged? You want to get critical? I ain't got time to come down to that. I got to keep looking up at where God's carrying us. You want to discourage my family? You want to come against me? You want to say all these negative things? I don't have time to come down because I'm doing a good work. You got to keep your eyes on the prize because the journey's short. The journey's short. It ain't going to matter about what people say. It's going to matter what you stand before God with. And so he says, I'm doing a great work. I listened to Chris Hodges this week, pastor of Church of the Highlands. He was talking about when they first started meeting, and they were meeting in a school over in Birmingham. And now mind you, they had sent out 30,000 invitations to come to their first service, and 400 people showed up. That just kind of shows you what the devil started telling me, oh, they're going to shut that school down. They're not going to let you meet there anymore. They're not going to let you do that anymore. They're not going to let you do. What if he'd have listened right then? He has the second largest church in the nation. What if he'd have listened when it was 400 people and the devil was telling me? He said, I got to listen to that. And he said, finally, I remember this verse in Nehemiah, and he said, I'm doing a great work. I ain't got time to come down to that devil. And he said, and I just would tell him that every Sunday. You know what? He said, eventually he would tell him that. Why? He drowned out the voice of his distraction. You don't think you're worth something? You start reading the Bible about Pat tells how God loves you. He cares for you. He's got a plan for you. And he knows that plan for you. And it's going to succeed. And you start believing those things, and you'll drown out the distraction. Sometimes you'll meet it directly. You'll drive out the distraction. Sometimes you'll drown out the distraction. And what I've learned also is sometimes in order to avoid things, in order to get all of the distractions out, you have to go to wall. You have to go to wall. That's what Nehemiah's doing here. See, you have to put some type of permanent interference in place to keep it, or to keep them from coming to where you're at. Maybe for you, it's people in your life. It's people that that are negative influences from the past, of a life that you used to use. Well, sometimes you've got to build a permanent interference between you and them. See, there have been people in your life that you can no longer be around because they'll distract you from God's purpose for your life. They'll rob you from the plans that he has for you. So what do? You build a wall. Look here. Nehemiah 6, verse 9, he said, they were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work, and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. One day I went into the house of Shemaiah and Deliah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in his home. And he said, let us meet in the house of God inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night they're coming to kill you. But I said, should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? He said, I wouldn't go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because of Tobiah and Sanballat, who had hired him. And he had been hired to intimidate me, so that I would commit a sin by doing this. And then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah, and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. In other words, I didn't get distracted. I built a wall to keep them out. Because what's he do? After he gets that wall built, he drives out those who try to intimidate him. And you know what? The wall was up and the gates were in place. They couldn't come back anymore. They had no place there. And see, you got people in your life that are a problem. Build a permanent structure between you and them. Because some people aren't there to profit your life. They're there to steal your joy. In 52 days, Nehemiah had done many impossibles. He had used unity and teamwork to rebuild all the walls. See, teamwork makes the dream work. We're just better together. And then Nehemiah had also crossed another border. See, when Nehemiah arrived in the city, the people had a defeated mindset. You ever coached a team that had a defeated mindset? It's really hard to win. And in 52 days, he brought people from living in tents to building a wall because they believed in their leader. From defeated to completed in 52 days. See, when it's God's will, it's his purpose and it's his glory. When it's God's will, it's his will, his purpose, and his glory. The secret is you're only going to be satisfied when you're doing his will. That's the only time you're going to be satisfied, is to find what it is that God's saying. I got one scripture, and Randy, you can come. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it, they labor in vain. Anything that we do, any path we take, any direction we go will all be in vain unless it's God's will. So what am I praying? I'm praying that we continue to hear the voice of God as he says, I'm ready to build. And then we get broken, and then we pray, and then we prepare. Broken, pray, and prepare. If we put our trust in the Lord, he will establish his kingdom through us, and we do. And what I've learned about the Lord is I don't have to be driving the ship. He's the ship. But if I just get inside of what he's doing, I'll end up where he's going. And I'll be satisfied where I am. Let's stand together this morning. Maybe you've got something going on in your life, and you need to start taking more of an authoritative role in what's going on. You need to take a stand against what's going on. Or maybe just this, maybe God is beginning a great work in you. Maybe he's whispering the things that he wants you to do. Because let me tell you, great revelation happens in the whispers of God. And maybe he's calling you to ministry. Maybe he's calling you to reach out to somebody. Maybe he's whispering his plans for your life. You're not sure yet, but I'm telling you, if you'll pray and you'll prepare, and he'll show up. In this church, we're praying and we're preparing. Maybe you need to get on board with that this morning. Or maybe this. Maybe you don't know the Lord. And today's your day. This morning, the altar is open. We want to pray with you. We want to be here for you. If God is speaking to your heart, would you respond to him this morning and be obedient?
Are you hurting and broken within? Overwhelmed by the weight of your sin? Jesus is calling. Have you come to the end of yourself? Do you thirst for a drink from the well? Jesus is calling. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Leave behind your regrets and mistakes. Come today, there's no reason to wait. Jesus is calling. Bring your sorrows and trade them for joy. From the ashes, a new life is born. Jesus is calling. Oh, come to
Every head bowed and every eye closed this morning. Is there anybody else this morning that said, Pastor, I'm just struggling? Would you remember me when you pray? If that's you this morning, would you lift your hand? Yeah, I see Sarah. I see Sarah. God has got something for your life. He's got something. Doesn't matter what age you are. I felt it as I was getting ready to come up this morning. It's just God was just saying, it doesn't matter what age you are. If you're a child, or if you're 70, 80 years old, God has still got a purpose and a plan for your life and something for you to do and a place for you at His table. And He's not forgotten you. He loves you. He wants good for you. He wants good for you. I'll pray for you this morning. Pray that God will move radically upon your life. Tell you what, let's do this. Let them sing that one more time. If there's somebody that doesn't know the Lord this morning, or you just need us to pray for you, would you come down and you, everybody else usually seated this morning. Let them sing that one more time. I just feel like you can just listen just a little bit longer. So if there's somebody this morning that says, I'm just struggling, Pastor, we will pray for you. We will lift you up. Sing that one more time.
Leave behind your regrets and mistakes. Come today, there's no reason to wait. Jesus is calling. Bring your sorrows and trade them for joy. From the ashes, a new life is born. Jesus is calling. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was born with the precious blood of Jesus.
Lord, we love you. Thank you for this day, God. I pray for those who raise their hand. They just need a touch. They're struggling this morning, God. Help them to realize that you're ready to build, God. You're ready to build it in. You're ready to increase the kingdom inside of them, God. You're ready to show them freedom like they haven't had before, God. You're ready to walk with them on a daily basis, God, and whisper to them as they sleep, God. Lord, you sing over them. Sing over them as they rest. Give them perfect peace. Lord, help them to repent. Help them to come to you, God. Work miraculous things today. Lord, we praise you. We love you. We lift you up. And we thank you for what you've done today, God. In your name I pray. Just a couple announcements. One is Caterers Life Group will meet tonight. If you need to know where that is, I can give you directions to that. Our other life group, Tyler's group, will not meet tonight. Normally our life groups for visitors, we normally have groups that meet in homes on Sunday nights, and we only have 2 groups each week. We're kind of in summer transition time right now, and so we have one group that's meeting tonight and one group that's not. But so if you want information, more information on that, let me know.
I know it's we're having for lunch, not over the Caterers Life Group, so just come to me and I'll.
Yeah. If you need to know about what to bring at the Strickland Life Group tonight, they'll be having hot dogs and be something to go with that. As you can see, go ahead. Tyler?
Real quick, it's not gonna be long. The men's golf out. I've been thrown in charge of that. But September 8th, it's a 2-man scramble at Cane Creek Golf Course on Fulton Club. They have reserved 5 tee times. That's 20 people. So we're going to have a deadline. I mean, not really a deadline. If you want to come and you show them the last day, you'll be able to play. But we want to get kind of get a head count so we can tell them, hey, how many tee times we need. But there's four people per tee time. But right now it's $31 per person. I'm trying to make that, which is great to me because you get lunch included. You get hamburger, hot dog, chips, and drink. And we're going to have a small devotion following. I'm not sure who's going to be the guest speaker yet, but we're working on that. But September 8th, I'll have sign-up sheets next week.